called the golden standard of body language experts by the Washington Post, credited in the New York Times with bringing body language to the national consciousness, and recently quoted in the Wall Street Journal, our speaker today is a true body language expert. The author of 7 books, she speaks to and consults with Fortune 500 companies, law enforcement organizations, and groups like ours. You can see her regularly on the Today Show, on CNN, Good Morning America, Fox News, PBS, the Discovery Channel, the History Channel, as well as in publications such as Psychology Today, Business Week, Fortune, Esquire, Sports Illustrated, Cosmo, Oprah, USA Today, and many more. She's here today to give you tools to enhance your body language, to improve your business and your communication skills. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Patty Wood. Patty, come on up.
All right, okay. We're going to be talking about body language, so we need to get our bodies warmed up. To that end, here's what we're going to do. In just a moment, I'm going to ask you to jump up out of your chairs, and I want you to greet at least 3 people. Go for some people who are not at your table, and I'd like you to greet them in an unusual way. I'd like you to greet them as if they are your long-lost friend, and you haven't seen them in years, and you can't believe that they're actually here this afternoon. So go for it. Up out of your chairs, and oh my God, I can't believe you're here. To meet for drinks later. Love it. Okay, by a show of hands, how many of you, since you got to this conference, have met somebody you did not know before? Put your hand up in the air. Keep your hand up there if you think they may have formed a first impression of you. Scary thought. We form first impressions very, very quickly. In the olden days, back when I was teaching body language and nonverbal communication at Florida State University, the research said you could form an accurate first impression in as little as 10 seconds. And I remember thinking, and having my audiences, my corporate clients, say, 10 seconds, really? And thinking personally, 10 seconds, scoping out hotel lobbies, airport lounges in 10 seconds, looking for the future father of my children. Now I'm looking for the future grandfather of my children. It's taking a while, but the most recent research will blow your mind. We can form accurate first impressions in as little as 1/300th of a second. How is that possible? How is that possible? It's possible because of your ability to read nonverbal communication, both body language and what's called paralanguage, voice tone, tempo, speaking rate. So all the nuances, even over the phone, you're forming impressions very, very quickly. Now, you may be saying, how accurate can you be in 1/300th of a second, Patty? By the research, 80% or higher in accuracy. And in just one of the studies on first impressions, they did at Harvard, they had students at Harvard look at videotapes of people running for a governor race in the 1950s. So these kids had no idea who these guys were. And they showed them the videotapes, and they kept shortening the tapes to see how quickly the students could decide who won the debate that they were watching between these candidates. They did shorter tape, shorter tape, shorter tape. And guess what? The students were not only able to determine who won the debate between these two candidates in the 1950s, they were able to accurately determine who won the political race by watching tape 1/300th of a second. So we form first impressions very, very quickly. And if you think about that at the store level, because I've gone on store visits to your stores, that is amazing. Because not only do we form them incredibly quickly, but they stick. According to the research, it takes up to 6 months of continuous face-to-face interaction to change an incorrect first impression. Isn't that amazing? And if you're talking about the power of nonverbal communication and thinking, really, Patty, how can you form this first impression so quickly? It's because in just 1 minute of interaction, the two of us could exchange. He got so scared when I started to walk towards him, I got to tell you. He's going, the body language expert is coming towards me. And I was already scared just seeing her in the hot pink jacket. Okay, so the two of us could exchange up to, now you're having a good time. Like, we'll meet for drinks. I'll call you later. Okay, so the two of us could exchange up to 10,000 units of nonverbal communication. Up to 10,000 nonverbal cues can be exchanged in just 1 minute. Is it good for you? It's good for me. We'll meet later, baby. Okay. So if you might be looking at me and going, Patty, what the heck is a cue? You're talking about exchanging when somebody comes into that store, 10,000 cues. One of the guys working in my store and that customer could exchange 10,000 cues. What the heck is a cue? Well, all the little movements of my hand, my placement in space, whether my body language is open windowed or closed windowed, whether I'm up or down, all my facial expressions, my gestures, all of those are nonverbal cues. And you can process them so quickly, and you're doing it in the limbic brain, the primitive brain. And that primitive brain actually does an incredibly good job at being quick and accurate because it's part of our basic survival instinct. And it's fascinating that it's part of our basic survival instinct, and it has that accuracy. In fact, when our ancestors were going across the plains carrying big old spears and hunting for woolly mammoth wearing fur dockers and fur miniskirts and these strange boots called Uggs, and they saw somebody from an unfamiliar tribe, they had to make a very quick assessment. Does not look like he will kill. To know whether or not it was safe to approach that. He's looking so calm right now, you have no idea. So safe, whether or not it was safe to approach that stranger. If our ancestors weren't both quick and accurate at making that assessment, what do you think happened to them? They died, exactly. And so did their gene pool. So we're actually, according to the research, genetically predisposed to form quick, accurate first impressions. And because that's so critical at the store level to be aware of how that customer comes in the store and creates that first impression of the store, and the employee creates that first impression of them, here's what we're going to do. In just a moment, I'm going to have you turn to a partner and do an exercise. So what I'd like you to do right now is just turn to somebody near you. It doesn't matter if you've known them for a long time or just met them, doesn't matter. If you could just turn to that person and make eye contact with them, do that right now. Okay. Some of you are winking. Just saying. There's winking going on. All right. Love that. Okay. Perfect. Now, when I say go, you're going to turn to that partner. You're going to take about 1 minute to share with that partner, again, doesn't matter how long you've known them, if you just met them, you're going to share with that partner, when I say go, your first impression of them and what led you to that first impression. Now, some of you are thinking right now, I sat next to the wrong person. All right, go for it. Take 1 minute. Share that first impression. Okay. I love it. Looks like you survived the exercise. Okay. I've learned over the years not to ask for specifics, but I do want to do a poll so we can see how the exercise turned out. How many of you just now said something nice about your partner or they said something nice about you? Put your hand up in the air. Isn't it great to make friends? Now, it's fascinating to me because I'll do this exercise. I'll have audiences your size, 800 to 1,000 people, total strangers. They're able to turn to a total stranger and have a first impression. They might not say every single bit of the first impression to that partner, but they have a first impression. And I've done this in organizations where people have worked alongside somebody for 20, 30 years. And they'll say, when I first met you, I thought. And they'll remember a first impression from 20 and 30 years ago. That tells you the power of first impressions. So at the store level, one of the things I want you to do when you get back is do this exercise and have people at the store level do this exercise. Pick up people and actually ask them, what was your first impression of me and what led you to that first impression? Now, I will tell you, choose these people carefully. Because as soon as you ask somebody, well, what did you think of me when you first met me? They're going to turn around and what do you think they're going to ask? Well, what did you think of me when you first met me? And if you hated them at first sight, you're in big trouble at that point. So you need to make sure that you choose those people carefully. And if you're thinking, well, Patty, how honest will they be with the feedback? Here's what I know. I call it the spinach between your teeth phenomena, and it's a really, really good way to think about your businesses. And that is sometimes fellow employees, your employees, customers just need to be asked what's going on and get to be able to give you feedback. How many of you have ever gone through a work day and suddenly looked in the mirror and realized something was amiss, something was wrong? Have you ever had that happen? Yeah, and didn't you wish people told you about it? That's the spinach between your teeth phenomena. So one of the things you're going to be seeking feedback on is people's first impression of you, and you're going to go ask other people, you're going to managers all the way down to employees at the store level, what's your first impression of me, and seek that feedback. Because remember, you form it very quickly, and it sticks. It's very difficult to change a first impression. And because looking at your research, 20% of the perceptions of your businesses are based on feedback and word of mouth, and 21% is based on store-level visits from your customers, it becomes paramount to understand your first impression. Now, I'm very, very biased and thinking first impressions are critical. part of that bias comes from something that happened with my parents before my sisters and I were around. My mom was down in Miami Beach, Florida, and she went dancing down in South Beach. Have you all heard of South Beach in Miami? How cool it is to go dancing? So she was dancing on the dance floor, and she looked across the dance floor, and she saw for the first time this cute blonde guy in uniform. And she went, that's him. And my dad was dancing on the same dance floor, and he looked across that dance floor, and he saw this cute blonde woman. And he went, oh my gosh, that's her. And my parents met that night on the dance floor, and they were married 1 week later. Obviously, they believed in the power of first impressions. Worked quite dramatically for them. They met on a Wednesday night on the dance floor. That Saturday, my dad went out and bought a red convertible and an engagement ring. He picked up my mother with the top down on the little red convertible, and he drove her out onto the beach underneath a full Miami moon and proposed. My dad had great body language. My mother said yes. They were married the following Wednesday. That Thursday, they got in the little red convertible, and they moved from Miami Beach to Seattle, Washington. That's the power of first impressions. Now, I'll give you a little bit of an aside to the story. How many of you have teenagers or have had teenagers in your home? Okay, I'm reading, some of you are going, oh yeah, bless you, bless you, bless you. I am one of 3 girls in the family. I have 2 older sisters. For some odd reason, some bizarre reason, my parents did not tell my sisters and I that they'd only known each other a week before they got married for a very long time. I wonder why they delayed that story, and in fact, they waited to tell us that story until my oldest sister was married with a child. I was well into college, and my middle sister was getting married the next day. And they thought, okay, it's safe to tell the story. And so they told the story, and my dad, who was a full-bird colonel in the Air Force, a fighter pilot, a war advisor at the Pentagon, retired, he became a CPA and a professor of accounting, a real softie, teared up as he told the story, and my mother teared up as she told the story. And they're telling the story, and the whole time they're telling the story, I'm remembering how many hundreds and hundreds of times my mother would say to me before I would go out on dates, now, Patty, 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 I just want you to remember, I never did anything with your father before we were married. Mom, you only had to wait a week. Think I can hold out on kissing for 7 days? Not a tough call there. So that power of first impressions, actually, they told that story. I was 19 and I was taking my first body language class, which ended up being my major and what I got all my degrees in. So it has power. It has dramatic power, and I want you to begin to think about your businesses with that dramatic impact of first impressions. Today, we'll not only learn the secrets of first impressions, but 5 secrets of reading body language. So here's the first question. I'd like you to discuss it briefly at your tables. What do you think is the most honest portion of the body? Go for that right now. Just take a minute at your tables, maybe about 30 seconds. What do you think is the most honest portion of the body? Perfect. Okay. I'm going to do a guess here. How many of you said eyes? Okay, eyes is a great guess. In fact, all across the country, and all my audiences, doesn't matter whether they're prison guards, police officers, law enforcement officers, C-suite level executives, eyes is typically the first thing. And eyes are actually the very first thing we notice about a person. Any other guesses besides eyes? Yes, go for it. Pardon me? The smile, ooh, that's really good. What else? The shoulders, ooh, that's good. What else?
Somebody said tongue.
Tongue. Oh, baby, oh, baby. Okay, you and he and I are going to go out. We're going to talk later. Yeah, I think we have some conversations to go through. So actually, I'm going to rock your world because this is something I saw on the store visits that I think is really going to have an impact. The most honest portion of your body, the feet. He's going, I had that answer, and they talked me out of it. Yes, the feet. The feet are under the least amount of conscious control. They are the first part of your body that responds to stress. And in fact, with a couple caveats we'll talk about in a minute, your feet point where your heart wants to go. Your feet are the most honest portion of the body. So what does that mean? It means that the feet of your customers can tell you quite a bit. And at the store level, people working in the stores, what they're doing with their feet can impact a rental and sale quite dramatically. And it's fascinating. Let's do this. How many of you have seen at the store level ever, this is what I saw in my store visits, a customer freeze at the doorway of the store? Have you ever seen that? Have you ever seen somebody freeze at the doorway and not know whether or not to come in? Okay. Have you ever had somebody, and this is one of the things I saw, whether there's a desk or a countertop, and they froze before they got to that space? They didn't know whether to approach the desk or the countertop to sign paperwork or deal with paperwork. How many of you have ever seen that before? Okay, that's very common. So people freeze in place. You have heard of the fight-flight response. Now you're going to have some more meat on those bones because in actuality, the more recent research has found that when we're stressed, we actually go freeze in place, flight, fight, fall or faint response. So one of the most important things to notice is where your customers are freezing in your store. It can help you with store design. It can help you with figuring out when to engage the customer, because those freeze points tell you places where the customer can change their mind about whether they're going to go forward with their decision and rent or purchase. So that's a pretty dramatic place to notice. It's fascinating, too, that at the store level, you've got all the stances, like the little toe stop. And it's interesting, what I used to call the cowboy stance that forever now will be called the Peter Pan, that you go broad out and take up space. The run for cover, when you put your feet towards the exit, and if you see a customer do that, that's very insightful, too. So the feet will point where the heart wants to go, and it tells you lots of information about what's going on at the store level. So here's the interesting thing. If people freeze in place, you're going, Patty, what do we do? What do we do then? Well, then there's another magic secret of reading body language, and you want to make sure that employees at that store level are opening up what I call your body windows. You have a window at the feet. You have another window here at the knees. You have another window here at the belly. I personally call that the Cheesecake Factory. And I'm actually putting in another wing I'm going to call the Dove Bar. And I love it because all the women in the audience immediately laugh. They know what I'm talking about. And you have the heart window, the throat window, the window at the mouth, the window at the eyes, and the window at the palms of the hands. And so one of those windows is really key in the beginning if you see a customer that's at a freeze point or indecisive point, and that is to do something very simple, because all of these are small changes for big impact. And one is to eyebrow flash. Now, I'll do it briefly. I'll do it actually more dramatically than you would actually have somebody do this at the store level, but I want you to see it. And that is, you see a customer, they're frozen at the door, and you go and raise your eyebrows up. So you raise your eyebrows up. Now that might sound, Patty, that seems sort of weird, but in actuality, it's a very natural body language response. You actually do that when you see friends, when you see family members, and in research, it's actually indicated as a high self-esteem notion. So you actually give off that cue to give somebody high self-esteem. Now here's the other dramatic part. Body language is beautifully symbolic. So when you open up your body language windows, you are actually sending a message to the customer, I feel safe with you, I am open and receptive to you, I am not going to attack or hurt you in any way. And in fact, the eyebrow flash is a key indicator of I am friendly, I am not going to harm you. And in fact, if you were going to harm that person, you would bring your eyes down like this and go into a glare. So the eyebrow flash, rather than the glare, the eyebrow flash says to the customer, not going to kill you. That's a good signal to give them. And one of the other interesting things about the eyebrow flash is that you usually naturally accompany that with a beautiful body language movement of up. So your facial expression and typically your body goes up. So a key to reading body language is not only to notice windows, but to notice that you go up when you're happy. I was in DC for the last couple days speaking, and I got to see my nephews and nieces. Have you ever noticed how little kids move through space? I mean, they get up off the floor, and they move through space, and they're going, da-da-da-da-da-da. They're always up. It's like they're always on their way to Disney World. They're always up. And then they become adults, and they have to pay their own mortgage, and they go down. So you want to watch up versus down, and you want to give at the store level that up body language, one of the key ones being that eyebrow flash. And here's another simple trick. You want to also show that you're approachable and have the salespeople at the store level be approachable, sometimes by doing something that looks, if you see it out of context, kind of weird, but is a true approach signal, and that is a head tilt. Now, there's a gender-based difference. Women tend to do head tilts more than men. But a head tilt is a sign of approachability. It harks back to animal kingdom that the subordinate wolf would bare the neck to say to the superior wolf, hey, I'm baring my neck to you to show you I'm not going to try to be king wolf, and therefore don't try to be alpha on me. I am subordinate. But it also has a very interesting impact in sales at the store level, because it says to that customer coming in, who may be apprehensive or anxious if they've never done this before, they may be embarrassed about, oh gosh, they're not supposed to check my credit history, but what if they do? And I don't know what, they're very stressed out if they've never gone through that process before. It makes you approachable, accessible, and you look friendly like you will not harm them. And on my store visits, I saw some employees do that very, very naturally. When they saw a customer stop at a certain point, they would eyebrow flash or smile or tilt their head very, very easily. But it's a really interesting small change for dramatic impact. Now, another thing that's kind of interesting is the palms of the hands. Now, if we had a full day of body language training, I'm definitely going to go into more detail in your breakout session this afternoon. I would tell you how to read every single part of the body for different messages, but I'm going to give you a big one now. The palms of the hands, you naturally read for indications about whether a person is going to be honest and open and self-disclose. In fact, the palms of the hands you naturally show when you're honest, when you're straightforward, when you're open, when you're trustworthy, when you're credible. The 4 first impression factors are credibility, likability, attractiveness, and power. And one of the key things, showing your hands in greeting, showing your hands when you're talking about how to do, okay, how long are you going to rent to own, all those things, actually makes the customer feel that you're open and honest and trustworthy. There's a reason we swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. There's a reason we go, I'm unarmed. We show the palms of the hands all the time, and we show the palms of the hands very simply in a simple little ritual, the handshake. Now, here's the skinny. For the first 8 years I spoke on body language, I didn't even mention handshakes because they seem so straightforward. They seem so simple. But inevitably, people would come up afterwards and ask me, well, what about if you get a bone crusher? And how do you do with a wimpy handshake? And so I ended up doing 3 years of academic research on handshakes. And now y'all are looking at me going, this woman has far too much spare time. And found out it's a very complex process. Actually had clients, I'm a national spokesperson occasionally for products, and they sponsor my research. So I ended up doing quite a bit of research on handshakes. Not a simple process at all. Here's what's interesting. Some of the stores, your employees are naturally shaking hands with people as they come in, some not. Sometimes there's some cultural differences, and we can talk about that this afternoon. But the handshake is a very effective sales tool that I want you to refresh at the store level. A handshake, and this is something to go back and tell your employees, is equal to 3 hours of continuous face-to-face interaction in its ability to establish rapport. Isn't that wild? In other words, if you shake hands with a prospect as they come into the store, it's as if you've been talking with them face-to-face for 3 hours. If you don't shake their hands, if your employees don't shake their hands, guess what? According to the research, it takes on average 3 hours to get to the same level of rapport, trust, and comfort. There's also a cascade of other positive benefits. You tend to be more persuasive. You're more likely to get the sale. You're perceived as more intelligent if you initiate the handshake and follow through. Your employees are more likely to remember the person, not necessarily their name, because the message goes to the limbic brain rather than the neocortex, but they're more likely to remember them. So it's a much more complicated process than we think. We're going to do a test run now. If you could just, sitting at your tables, if you could just shake hands with somebody sitting next to you, let's do a pre-test. Okay? Awesome. Okay. All right. Let's notice what just happened. Because even with that simple little handshake, what immediately happened is you started talking to one another, you engaged with one another, and I actually had to do a little sound effect to get the attention back again because you were connected. And that's the most important thing you can possibly do with a customer or an employee can do with a fellow employee. They can connect, be real, be present, and in the moment. And the handshake is a magic trick to do that. Now, I started my business in Tallahassee, Florida, the state capital of Florida. And I've been a professional speaker for over 30 years. So obviously, I started the business when I was 5. And I was very young, and I'd go out to call on people. And Tallahassee is very, very southern. So I would get a wimpy handshake when I would call on prospects. My dad was the full bird colonel in the Air Force, war advisor at the Pentagon, college professor, 3 daughters, no sons. He taught us to shake hands. He taught my sisters and I to shake hands. I knew that wimpy handshake was not going to work. That wimpy handshake had the potential for them to not recognize me as a powerful source of information and pay me lots of money. So it wasn't going to work. So I worked on what can you do to prevent a wimpy handshake, because basically once you are inside of a wimpy handshake, there is not a whole heck of a lot you can do. You're kind of stuck. Now I have a third person to go for drinks with right here. He just kissed my hands, guys. I've never had that happen before. I'm kind of excited and love you very much. So when you shake hands, you could, and I actually did lab research on this because people were very, very curious. If you get a wimpy handshake and you know it's not because they have a hand injury or they're an older woman from the South, you can regrip. Or you can even say out loud, let's try that again. And interestingly enough, the subjects in my research did not even remember you regripped or said, let's try that again. They just liked you better. They liked the people that had the better handshake than the person that just had the wimpy handshake. But ideally, you want to use those preventative measures. As you might guess, one of the ways to get the best handshake possible is to start early. Remember the eyebrow flash? Well, there's a stranger barrier at about 15 feet. And this is kind of interesting for me from visiting different stores because in a lot of the stores, the door, or even just outside the door, is that 15-foot mark, that stranger barrier that they have to cross over to feel comfortable. So if you want a good handshake, if you want rapport with a customer at the store level, you need to be teaching the employees to recognize that 15-feet stranger barrier and have them eyebrow flash, ideally eyebrow flash, sometimes tilt their head and smile if that works for them. And then to have a good handshake, good rapport, and make sure they feel comfortable entering and talking to you right away, you want to start that handshake early. So you want to strike early. Because usually when we go to shake hands, we wait to shake hands till we're about 2 feet in. So I want you to go back at the store level and retrain your employees to start earlier than that. Because sometimes when those customers come in, if they've not been through the process before, they don't know how to act. They don't know how to be. They're strangers in a strange land, and your employees can make them feel comfortable very, very quickly by putting their handshake out early. Now, there's a decision point when all that can be made, and we can talk about that in more detail this afternoon. But I actually recommend that you have employees start shaking hands about 6 feet out instead of that 2-foot mark. And I actually recommend, after we go through this exercise, you take this exercise back and have them do it. Because at the 6 feet mark, there's another stranger barrier. And if that customer, that prospect, sees that hand go out, they will automatically, except for a few cultural exceptions, they'll automatically feel welcomed in. They see the palm of the hand, and they're more likely to shake hands and not be able to avoid the handshake. And what we know about handshakes is once you shake somebody's hand, you shake that prospect's hand, guess what? They're less likely to leave the store early. Do you know what I mean? Where you have them kind of wander in and wander out again. Nod your heads if you know what I'm talking about. You know, they might have to wander in and wander out a few times before they do something. You don't want them wandering in and wandering out. You want to get them. So 6 feet out, you're going to shake hands. You're going to put your hand out there. And you're going to strike out firmly to send this symbolic message. I'll do this up here so you can see it clearly. To send this symbolic message, ooh, baby, I can take it. Do not have them do the hip thing. Okay? You're going to strike out firmly with looking them in the eyes, strike out firmly so they have that option and opportunity and see it as an opportunity to shake hands. And then I'm going to teach you a secret. This is one of my favorite small changes for big impact. If y'all could put your hands out like you would normally shake hands. Okay, that handshake, it's very easy for the customer to grab just the ends of your fingers and give you a wimpy handshake. You don't want the wimpy handshake. So that's a good way to end. You can put your hands down. But instead, what I'd like you to do and teach at the store level is to have them change that handshake, small change for big impact, to instead of fingers out like this, to actually avoid the wimpy handshake by scooping in. So when you go to shake hands, you're going to scoop in so that you can have what's the single most important part of the handshake, and research I've done for the past 7 years in the US, Canada, and Europe, palm-to-palm contact. You want palm-to-palm contact. If you don't get palm-to-palm contact, that person is uncomfortable because the palms are so important. They don't know what's going on. They feel uncomfortable. So what I'd like you to do now, if y'all could just shake hands with a couple people and scoop in. If you could just scoop in. Do that a few times. Perfect. Awesome. That's terrific. I love it. The scoop is working. Awesome. Okay. I'm going to do this so I can see by a show of hands. How many of you, because I saw differences in different stores, how many of you have a counter in your store? How many of you have a counter in your store? It looks like about 3/4 of you have the counter in the store. I want you to realize, as you probably have realized, that counter is really interesting in its dynamics. And one of the things that could sometimes be an issue is that the customer, if you assume this is closed all the way, can't see from here down that employee. They can't see. And specifically, they can't see the feet and that belly, so it makes them a little bit less likely to approach that counter space and a little bit more likely to feel uncomfortable as they engage across that counter space. So I'm going to teach you a trick. This is a gender-based difference in communication. Women and men, as you know, are very different. Okay? What you may not know is that guys and gals like to communicate differently. Guys, can y'all see me? Can y'all see me? Guys like to communicate side by side. When they want to self-disclose, when they want to give the real skinny, if they want to feel safe and not threatened and have to go alpha face-to-face, they prefer to interact and talk to each other side by side. Guys go into war together side by side. They play on teams together side by side. They feel equal in power and status side by side. And by the way, since I teach deception detection and analyze presidents and suspected murderers, guess what? You're more likely to tell the truth guy to guy, side by side. And for women selling, guess what? Side by side with guys makes the guy feel more comfortable. Women are very different. We like to communicate face to face. Face to face, we feel heard and understood. We can read all your body language because women are more adept at reading body language cues. We feel more comfortable face to face. So you sell to a woman, she's going to feel more comfortable face to face, even across that counter. The guy, however, across that counter may, and this goes through all cultures, by the way, because I know you're working on expanding that minority market, guys feel more threatened face to face. They're more likely to shut down, go for war, argue, feel uncomfortable across that counter face to face. By the way, that is why guys like to sit at the bar and women like to sit at the booth. Have you ever noticed that? Yep, side by side. That's why you get in a car, a guy is driving the car, female passenger, the guy is faced what way? This way. The female passenger is faced what way? Trying to be face to face, right? And here's the problem. Female driver, male passenger, the male passenger is facing this way, scared out of his ever-loving mind, and the female driver is making him that way because she's driving the car like this. Right? You've seen it. Side to side versus face to face is one of your most powerful secrets in selling at the store level. I want you to feel that. If you could, please, when I say go, you're going to stand up out of your chair, you're going to face towards a partner, maybe get with somebody you haven't been with before, and wait for further directions. If you could go for that right now. All right. Wonderful. Far out freaky cane. Now, between the two of you, decide who's going to be partner A and who's going to be partner B. Make that decision very quickly. Wonderful. Okay. Can I acknowledge that the type A personality just told you what you were going to be? And now my type A personality is going, I was just doing that to be effective. I was just trying to be helpful. All right, here's what's going to happen. You're going to start face to face. Partner A is going to be the speaker. Partner B is going to be the listener mover. Partner A, you're going to share what have you gotten so far and what are you going to do with it. As you're doing that, partner B is going to go from face to face listening position, totally silent listening, to little bit at a time till they're side by side with you. Go for that right now. Wonderful. Next round. Partner A, you're going to be the listener mover. Partner B, you're going to share what you've gotten so far and what you're going to do with it. As you're doing that, partner A, you're going to go from side by side listening position with your partner to a little bit at a time, slowly go face to face. And then after you're done, discuss what you noticed. Go for that. Okay. Hanging out right where you are Okay, by a show of hands, how many of the guys preferred this, felt better, a little bit better at the side-by-side position? Okay. How many of the women felt a little bit better at the face-to-face position? Okay. So here's one of the things I find interesting when I deal with people that are in sales. Sometimes what I find, if you're really good at sales, you've learned to adapt to feel comfortable in both spots. I want you to go back to the store level. I want you to do this very exercise and ask them what they noticed about that. And then I'm going to teach you another trick. If y'all could thank your partners and return to your seats. Okay. If there is a counter, and your employees begin to pick up body language that tells them that that prospect or a customer is anxious in some way, and I'm going to give you a few of those before we leave today and more in the afternoon session. But if they feel that and they're speaking across from a man, I'm going to recommend that they actually come out from behind the counter. They can use the paperwork, because you've got fun little paperwork. They can use the paperwork as an option. Well, let's talk about that and get side by side with them. To tell you how powerful that is, I'm going to give you a specific story example. I go and consult in hotels and hospitals around the country. I talk a lot about the store level too. I was training at a hotel, taught the technique of coming out from behind the counter and getting side by side. I was doing all the shifts of one particular hotel, went down to the front desk, and one of the people ran up to me that worked behind the front desk. She says, Patty, I just had a guy come in. He and his wife were over in front of the front desk, and he was screaming and yelling. He was so angry, and I remembered what you said about this creates competition. This creates argument. So I came and I just sat. I call it the love V. So it's not quite side to side. You go into a love V and you talk about the issue. I went into the love V. He immediately calmed down. His anger disappeared. We had a conversation. He was so happy by the end. Patty, he just gave me a $5 tip. So that change of face-to-face versus side-by-side can make a really, really big difference. One last thing I want to give you a hint of. Comfort cues. We comfort cue when we're nervous and stressed out. When we don't feel good, when the customer is upset or not sure about the price or should they rent to own, they will comfort cue to tell you that they're a little bit nervous. And when you see that comfort cue as a shift from baseline, that's the time that you can teach your employees to make them feel comfortable and ease right away. And sometimes that's shifting to a different kind of conversation and then coming back to signing paperwork. Sometimes that's doing things like matching and mirroring, which I'll teach you in the afternoon session. But those comfort cues are really critical cues. And you need to start looking for them. And some of you right now want to rub your nose. I know you do. The nerve endings and the tip of the nose, the eyes, around the ears, the top of the lip, many nerve endings, they fire when we're anxious. So you're going to hear some of those cues. I'm going to do one last exercise with you. I'm going to teach you two things before we go into that exercise, and then I'm going to do a closing story. They gave me a little bit of extra time. So here's the key. When you're nervous or anxious, the customer's nervous or anxious, that prospect is nervous or anxious, you might see them do all the things we've talked about today. Instead of going towards, like I taught you to do for the handshake, instead of going towards, they will step away or they'll back away. They go towards when they want, when they like, when they're comfortable with the deal. They back up. It might be their head, their body. They will open up when they're comfortable, when they've got a stack of cash and they're ready to pay off. That's a great spot. They'll open up their body language. When they're comfortable with what's going on, they'll be up rather than down. When they're comfortable, they won't comfort cue. They won't need to do that. So you're going to see all those cues together. And their feet will be pointed to where their heart wants to go. Instead of the feet, when they're talking to somebody behind the counter, starting to wave goodbye, which is an indicator they're ready to go if the feet go towards the door. Also, one little kick that's kind of fun. When somebody's uncomfortable with the price, with the deal, with what's going on, they might clear their throat, they might cough. Now, sometimes you do that because you've got allergies or a cold. Sometimes you do that because what you're saying doesn't go down well. So actually you need to teach at the store level for salespeople to be very careful about coughing or clearing their throat as they're talking about the deal, because it's actually also an indication that there's perhaps deception. Even if they're doing it to clear their throat, it might be read as deception. In fact, it's such a clear deception cue that I often teach, if you go to church and the minister starts talking about infidelity, listen to the congregation. Note who is coughing and clearing their throats. Because it's an interesting cue if it's a blip from that person's baseline behavior. So, one last exercise. If you could sit in your chairs facing towards a partner and wait for further directions. Sit in a chair facing towards your partner. Perfect. All right, perfect. Now, I told you that the palms of the hands were significant for showing honesty and willingness to self-disclose. And I want you to be aware that when you show the hands, you're being honest and showing you're willing to self-disclose. By the way, those body windows are very important. I just remembered I wanted to tell you at the store level, I notice sometimes somebody behind the counter will be facing towards the computer, and a customer comes up and they stay that way instead of turning towards the customer, making sure all the windows are open. Okay, so what's going to happen? One of you in each pair, raise your hands. Okay. The other person is going to be the human lie detector test. So one of you is the patty cake person. My hands up person with one statement right after the other. My hands up person, keep talking till I say stop. Palms up person, start lying. You're going to lie one right after the other about your life, your income, your hobbies. Down. Other partner, your turn, palms up. Go for it. Palms up person, start lying. Down. Take about 30 seconds with your partner. What did you notice the liar doing with their body language? Did you notice any of the things we've talked about or other things today? Go for it right now. What did you notice? What did you see? Was there blinking? Frequent blinking. That's actually called the Nixon effect, the frequent blinking. Okay. Sometimes people shutter their eyes as they try to think of the next lie. Sometimes the mouth gets tense. We'll talk about more of that in the breakout. Sometimes people shift in their chair. The hands move. Did you see that? Sometimes there's laughter, right? Laughter and anger are actually two big covers for deceit, interestingly enough. Some of you paused and had trouble coming up with the lies, right? I just want to recognize, looking around the room, some of you had no trouble at all. Just one lie right after the other. This is fun, Patty. So it would be great if you could go back at the store level and say to your employees, okay, baby, palms up. Talk to me. I've had people go back and do that in their families, tell their teenagers, stop, talk to me, put up your palms. I want you to notice what you do with your hands. I want you to, at the store level, notice, because I notice at the store level, sometimes the employees are holding pens or holding things instead of keeping those palms up and open during that sales interaction. You've learned an enormous amount in a very short period of time. Couple of different things. I am your go-to coach from now on. You've got my phone number on your paperwork. There's a handout at the outside of the door. I am your go-to person from now on. If you've got questions, if you want to talk about things, call me up, email me, text me. I am your resource. I'm going to really, really want to encourage you to go back and use this stuff at the store level. Try some new things, get some fun energy going about having them notice and recognize how their body language is in fact affecting the sales and what they can read in the customer. I'd been speaking for 2 years back at the beginning of my career, and I thought, I have arrived. I was asked to speak in Orlando, Florida, at one of the big luxury hotels as the keynote speaker. There was 500 people in the audience, mostly school administrators. Behind me on the stage that day were 2 state senators who had spoken before me. You can tell I like to be out with the audience. In this case, I was stuck on the stage, but there was a little bit of space in front of the podium. So pretend the podium is right behind me. And I'm doing my speech on body language, and it's going really well, and I'm about 15 minutes in, and I say to the audience, your nonverbal communication is much more honest than your words when the elastic on my half slip breaks and my underwear falls to my feet. I am now in front of 500 men with my underwear around my ankles. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I'm a professional. I can handle this. I gingerly step out of the slip. I hold it high. I say to the audience, a Freudian slip. And they groan just like you did. And I think this is, oh my gosh. And then I realize, I've got 45 more minutes with this audience, and I've got my slip in my hand, and I'm stuck on the front of the stage, and the podium's behind me, so I think I'm being so clever, I toss it. Oh, yes. I hit a state senator smack dab in the face. The crowd goes wild. They are crazy. There are napkins and room keys being thrown onto the stage. I could not have made this happen. Then I hear another roar. I look behind me. The state senator has my slip, and he's twirling it in the air. My gosh, how can I recover from this? And then I have this moment, and it's magical, and we connect, and we're present exactly the way I want you to be with your customers and train your employees to be with your customers. We have magic. And they're very generous. They give me a standing ovation. I think perhaps they were expecting a second show. I'm from Florida originally. I want to get pool time, but incognito, sunglasses, hat, T-shirt, towel wrapped around me. I'm at the pool. And then I hear it. They're talking about me in the pool. I know they're talking about me because they go, that poor female speaker this morning. I was the only female speaker on the program. They go, first she loses her underwear, then she hits a state senator smack dab in the face with it, and finally she finishes her entire speech so we can see straight through her cream-colored skirt to her purple flowered underwear. You'll notice today I am wearing pants. I have not worn a skirt or a dress to speak in since that speech oh so many years ago. I share that story. Part of it is it doesn't matter what happens, it matters how you handle what happens. But I tell you the story about my parents, I'll tell you this story because I want you to remember that the greatest gift you can give to another human being, the greatest gift that you can give to a prospect, to a customer, is to understand them, to be present with them, to connect to them. And I want you to remember from this story, body language is very revealing. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I hope everybody enjoyed that as much as I did. That was great, Patty. Thank you so much. You know, when we were thinking about what kind of speakers we wanted to have today, I decided to venture out into the land of the unknown and get someone in body language. I think it gave us some clues of how we could perform better in the stores. Lunch is set up right outside. We have buffet lunch. Please line up. I think we have 4 different tables lined up. Please get your lunch, bring them back in, have your lunch, and the next speaker will start at 12:30. Thank y'all.